Welcome, everyone. You're joining us for a deep dive today, and we're looking into, well, a really disturbing case out of Denver.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to unpack the circumstances surrounding the death of 17-year-old Jasmine Rivas-Hernandez. This happened back in March of 2022.
That's right. And for this, we've got a few different sources we're drawing from. First, there are the initial news reports, right after it happened, from 9 New WS and Denver 7 in Denver.
Okay, so the local perspective right away.
Exactly. They covered the immediate aftermath, the community reaction, all that. Then we also have reports that came out much later, nearly 10 months later, actually.
10 months, wow.
Yeah, from the New York Post and the Denver Gazette. And these ones, they detail the arrests that were eventually made.
Okay, so that's our sort of mission here then. We want to understand that whole journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trace the initial shock, that grief, the family just begging for answers, and then see how the investigation unfolded, leading eventually to those arrests.
It's a real contrast, isn't it, between those early, very emotional pleas and then the later, more kind of fact-based police work coming out.
Definitely. So let's start at the beginning. March 2022, those first reports. What do we know about the scene, the discovery of Jasmine's body?
Well, the reports from 9NEWS and Denver 7, they paint a pretty grim picture. Jasmine was found on a Saturday afternoon, March 26, just after 12:30 p.m.
Midday.
Yeah, in an alley near Colfax in Quebec in Denver. And police, they immediately called it a homicide.
Right from the start. No question it was foul play.
No. But what really hits you, I think, in those first reports is the raw emotion from her family and friends. It's just palpable.
Yeah, you really get a sense of that intense grief. How did they remember her? What did they say about Jasmine?
They talked about her being kind, caring, and full of life. That phrase came up. And, something that seemed especially tragic was she was just out to turn 18 in June. She was apparently really looking forward to it.
Oh, wow. So close to that milestone.
Exactly. And you saw that grief reflected publicly, too. Friends and family set up a memorial right away, balloons, flowers.
Very visual outpouring.
Yeah. And her mother's words, they were quoted in the reports, just incredibly heartbreaking. She said, "That's my baby. And they took my baby away from me where she didn't have to. They didn't have to do that. There's no reason." She's a little baby. Her life was just beginning. I mean, you feel the weight of that loss.
You really do. Just devastating. And it wasn't just her mother, right? Other family members were speaking out too?
Oh, absolutely. They were all sharing this sense of devastation, but also this desperate need to understand why. What happened?
And there was a follow-up report, I think, from 9 and UWS that mentioned their frustration.
Yes, exactly. A few days later, they were just feeling lost. No information was coming out. Jasmine's cousin, Diana Hernandez, she said, we want answers, and we want to know why this happened. It just makes no sense.
Just left hanging in the dark.
Totally. Waiting for police, waiting for any news. Diana also said something really poignant, like, "I'm never going to get to see her again. I'm never going to get to talk to her again. And it's just because somebody took that from me." That really sticks with you.
Yeah, that sense of finality. And the Denver 7 report, did it add more about Jasmine herself?
It did. Friends describe her as a loving sibling. She had plans, ambitions. She wanted to finish school, get a job, make her own money, get ahead.
Just starting out.
Right. Her grandmother also spoke about the heartbreak, just the simple, awful fact that she'd never talk to Jasmine again. And across the board, there was this strong demand for accountability. The family saying the person responsible needs to pay for it for the rest of her life.
A real cry for justice. But interestingly, in those early reports, they didn't say how she died, did they?
No, that's a key point. They stated it was a homicide investigation, but the actual cause of death, not mentioned initially.
Which is common, I guess, to protect the investigation.
Often, yes. Police hold back details like that. But you have to imagine, for the family, grieving like that, and not even knowing the specifics of how she died, that must have been just another layer of agony.
Yeah, unbearable. Okay, so let's shift gears. We jump forward almost 10 months, January 2023, and the story changes with these reports from the New York Post and the Denver Gazette.
Right. This is where we get the major development. Arrests. After all that time, all that public silence from investigators, suddenly 3 people are arrested in connection with Jasmine's death.
Who were they?
Robert Adam Solano, who's 34, Joseph Thomas Chavez, 26, and Shiloh Fresquez, 21.
Okay. And did these later reports finally reveal how Jasmine died?
Yes, they did. They confirmed she had been shot to death.
That's awful.
And the Denver Gazette, it got quite specific, citing the autopsy report. It mentioned gunshot wounds to her torso, back, neck, and her right arm.
Wow. That paints a really violent picture.
It really does. And then the New York Post added another detail based on a police affidavit that was, well, very disturbing.
What was that?
It reported that when Jasmine's body was found, her legs were crossed at the ankles, and they were tied together with a pair of white headphones.
Tied with headphones.
Yeah.
That's incredibly bizarre and chilling. What does something like that even suggest?
Well, for investigators, a detail like that is something they'd look at very closely. It could hint at the perpetrator's state of mind, maybe some element of control, maybe even point towards a motive that wasn't obvious. It certainly suggests it wasn't just random.
Right. It feels more calculated somehow. So how did the police actually link these three individuals, Solano, Chavez, and Fresquez, to the crime after all that time? What was the evidence?
It seems like it was a combination of things. A key piece was a stolen truck.
Okay.
Surveillance footage caught this truck near the alley around the time Jasmine was killed. And Joseph Chavez's DNA was found inside that truck.
His DNA in the truck near the scene, that's a strong link.
A very strong link.
Even
Even more direct. Jasmine's blood was also found in that same truck.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Chavez is linked by DNA in her blood in this vehicle. What about the other two, Solano and Fresquez?
Cell phone records seem to be the key for them.
Ah, location data.
Exactly. The reports say cell records placed both Fresquez and Solano, who were apparently a couple near the alley where Jasmine's body was discovered, right around the time she died.
So you've got forensic evidence from the truck for Chavez, and then location data putting Fresquez and Solano right there, too.
Seems to be the picture, yeah. DNA, blood, phone records. That combination appears to be what led investigators to them.
And what were the specific charges they faced? Were they all the same?
No, they varied. Robert Adam Solano, he got the most serious charge, first-degree murder.
Okay. Accused of the killing itself.
Right. Then Joseph Thomas Chavez, his charges were accessory to a crime of first-degree murder and also abuse of a corpse.
Abuse of a corpse. That might relate to the headphones detail.
It's possible. Or perhaps other actions taken after her death. And the third person, Shiloh Fresquez, she was charged with accessory to a crime of first-degree murder, like Chavez, but also attempt to influence a public servant.
Interesting. So different alleged roles. Solano as the main perpetrator, the other two as accessories after the fact, essentially.
That's how the charges laid out, yes.
Right.
The attempt to influence a public servant charge for Fresquez also raises questions about maybe misleading investigators.
Yeah, perhaps. And didn't the reports mention something about Solano and Chavez already being locked up?
They did, yeah. When the warrants for Jasmine's murder were issued, both Solano and Chavez were already in custody on unrelated charges. Fresquez, she was arrested earlier in January. So the investigation was clearly moving forward behind the scenes, even while these guys were potentially being held for other things.
It really shows how complex these investigations can be, doesn't it? Multiple threads running at once.
Absolutely. But one thing that wasn't revealed in those January 2023 reports, at least not publicly by the police, was the motive.
Still no why.
Still no clear answer to why she was killed, why Jasmine was targeted.
And even with the arrests, that huge question mark must have still been hanging over everything for the family.
Without a doubt. The New York Post article actually circled back to that initial quote from Diana Hernandez, Jasmine's cousin.
The one saying, "It just makes no sense."
That's the one. They included it again, highlighting that even with suspects in custody, that fundamental senselessness of the tragedy was still overwhelming for the family.
Yeah, it kind of brings it all back around, doesn't it? The arrests are a massive step, obviously, but they don't automatically erase the pain or answer every single question.
Not at all. It's often just one stage in a very long process for the families involved.
Okay, so let's just recap this deep dive. You've heard this incredibly tragic story unfold. We started back in March 2022 with the discovery of Jasmine's body, that immediate outpouring of grief from the community and her family just desperate for information.
A really raw and uncertain time.
Then nearly 10 long months of, well, apparent silence before those arrests finally happened in January 2023.
And those arrests brought new, awful details about how Jasmine died, the shooting, the detail about the headphones. But they also revealed how investigators, painstakingly pieced together the evidence, the DNA, the blood, the phone records, to identify the suspects.
And you can really see that stark difference, can't you? Between the initial reports full of emotion and questions and the later ones detailing the investigation's progress. The picture became clearer, but definitely more disturbing.
It did. The facts emerged slowly, painting a fuller picture over time.
It really leaves you thinking, though. Arrests are made, yes, but you just can't fathom what Jasmine's family is still going through after that kind of loss and such a long, agonizing wait for answers.
Absolutely, and the legal process is likely far from over for them.
Right. What comes next? Trials, court proceedings, and maybe more broadly, what does this whole case, this journey from discovery to arrest, tell us about, the complex path to finding justice after something so violent?
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of the immense impact these crimes have, not just on the immediate family, but on the whole community, and the often long, difficult road towards any kind of resolution. A lot to reflect on.